Hey, great to have you here. So today we're going to be taking a look at the new Ryan Coogler horror film called Sinners. And the premise of this movie is pretty much the story takes place back in 1932 in Mississippi. And we have these twin brothers, Stack and Smoke, who are both played by Michael B. Jordan, which I don't think I realized would be the case coming into the movie. It must be the year for the same actor playing twins, since we got that same situation in The Monkey earlier in the year. But we have these twin brothers coming back to their hometown to open up a new hangout after finding success in Chicago. And most of the first half of the movie is them preparing for their business's grand opening as we meet other cast members as they come across them along the way to either invite them or have them help work the event. The second half of the film is where the action really picks up, where we encounter this vampire who gradually turns other members of the town, and that's the general gist of the film. Before jumping into my pros and cons for the movie, quick reminder that if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel for more horror movie reviews like this one. So as far as some of the pros for the film, the first one being there's really great acting done by everyone in the movie here. Michael B. Jordan is particularly charismatic in both roles, and you can tell he tries to give each brother their own personality, especially when they're in the same scene together. Stack, for example, is more upbeat and jovial, while Smoke is more reserved and calculated. It doesn't hurt that they also give Stack a red hat and Smoke a blue hat, making them pretty obviously distinct from one another, kind of like a Mario Luigi type of appearance there. Another positive that I really took away from the film is I like the inclusion of music in this movie and how it's interwoven into the timeline of things. There's one particular scene at the brothers' grand opening where one of our main characters, the preacher's son, is playing guitar and singing as we see others from the past and future celebrating along with them. And I thought that was just a really cool visual showing kind of the timelessness of music overall. Then for a third pro I'll say for this film, the vampires I thought were pretty well done. They were the right level of creepy, and I thought the lore behind them, like them needing to be invited inside the home, was a fun element to include here. Jumping into a couple cons I'll say I had for the film, the first one being on rewatch, I could see the premise set up in the first hour or so not being as exciting to sit through since you kind of already know where the story goes. And then the second one I'll say, the film had some logic flaws or conveniences here and there. Semi-spoilers here, jumping to a few examples, like we have moments where the vampires somehow aren't able to overthrow the regular humans despite heavily outnumbering them, and then they just run away. And then we have another moment where none of the vampires warn their vampire leader that Michael B. Jordan is approaching him. Also, none of the vampires, primarily the first one, seem really prepared for when the sun will come up eventually. Those examples that I mentioned, along with a few others I'll say, are just some minor logic flaws here and there that if you take too seriously, you could be critical of the film of. Then a third con that I just remembered that I wanted to make sure I included in this conversation was they start the movie off with doing kind of the ending of the film. A lot of movies do this where they show the ending of the film at the beginning and then they do, hey, a few days prior or one day prior, which they do here. A lot of times it makes sense where we kind of go full circle and we wind up where we began the movie, but I don't think it made a lot of sense to include that here. I don't think there's a lot of value added. Let me know down in the comments below if there's something that I may have missed that this really added a lot of value by incorporating, but it felt like by showing us one of the characters at the beginning of the movie, which is at the end of the movie, we kind of know that character winds up living. So I feel like in some aspects that kind of spoiled my anticipation of things, and I realized, okay, this character's not going to be in harm's way at this point because we saw him at the beginning, so he's all good to go. So in this movie in particular, I don't think it made a whole lot of sense to follow that formula of doing that end at the beginning situation because we just kind of crossed out that character as far as being concerned about him dying at any point throughout the film because we know he's going to live. So that was kind of a downside to me personally. Before jumping into a final rating, I'll give some scores on some different areas for this horror film, kind of like I did with the Monkey review. So starting off with the plot, I'll give this one a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed the story that they told here of these two brothers and then interwoven a vampire story alongside that. So great combination of two different kind of types of films overall. For an entertainment score, I'll give this one a 4 out of 5 as well. I just feel like, especially on first watch, the story had me intrigued as far as where it was going next, and there was a lot of tension build up until we finally got to that vampire reveal and a lot of the action breaking loose there. For a gore score, I'm a little bit mixed on this one. I'm either going to say 3 or 4. I'll probably go with a 4 out of 5 overall, just because there was definitely scenes where people are getting torn apart or getting killed that definitely had some gore effects. It's not overly over the top, though, necessarily, so I wouldn't say it's something to avoid if you're afraid of gore or not a fan of it, but there's definitely some violent scenes being a vampire movie, of course. For a scare score, I'm going to give this one only a 2 out of 5. Early on in the movie, like the first 10 minutes, there's quite a few jump scares, I'll say, but they kind of abandon that, and there's not really that many of those going forward. So while there's a lot of tension buildup, specifically scare moments, I would say there's not a whole lot throughout this film, so 2 out of 5 for this one. And then for rewatchability, this one I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. As I mentioned, that first half of the film, I could see upon rewatch maybe dragging on a little bit longer, and you may want to get to the action quicker, but it kind of sets up the premise, so I get in some aspects it's needed, but in some areas, feels like it could be a little bit slow-paced start of a film when you're watching for a second time. And now an overall rating for the movie. I really enjoyed the film and viewed it as a pretty strong historical story as well as a vampire film. And for a score here, I'm going to give Sinners an 8 out of 10. It was a great movie that only had a few areas that I would say could have been done a little bit better, and as I mentioned, my short review of it coming out of the theater, definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it in theaters at this point in time. But what do you think? How would you rate the film? What parts did you enjoy the most? Sound off on all things Sinners down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.